In August 1978, a Boeing 747 of Olympic Airways was taking off. As the plane sped down the runway, one of its engines suddenly exploded. Despite this, the aircraft had already reached the necessary speed for takeoff and could not stop safely. With one engine down, the plane struggled to gain altitude and was at risk of stalling. Flying dangerously low over the densely populated area of Kaltha, the pilot had to make a quick decision. His unexpected actions amazed everyone and ultimately saved the lives of all 418 people on board. This is the inspiring story of how one captain's quick thinking during a critical moment saved Olympic Airways Flight 411. On August 9, 1978, it was a typical hot summer day in Greece when 400 passengers, mostly American tourists returning from vacation, prepared to board a Boeing 747 of Olympic Airways. This flight, numbered 411, was scheduled to leave Athens International Airport at 2 p.m. for New York's JFK Airport. The Boeing 747-200 was chosen for its capacity to handle large numbers of passengers efficiently. However, the jet did have some issues in the past. It was equipped with Pratt & Whitney JT9D turbofan engines, which had been developed quickly and had some flaws, requiring careful maintenance to operate well. There was also a notable incident with American Airlines where the JT9D's fan blades broke apart after an engine exploded shortly after takeoff. This issue was often linked to the engine's overheating during startup. Despite these problems, the Boeing 747 remained a popular choice, and on that day, 400 passengers confidently boarded the aircraft. Along with them, there were 18 crew members, including the experienced Captain CIS Megidis, who had been flying with Olympic Airways for 32 years. His first officer, Konstantinos Fardos, was not only a skilled pilot, but also a close friend. Crew completed the pre-flight checks, and the Boeing 747 was cleared for takeoff. The plane was pushed back from the gate just before 2 p.m., under clear skies and in hot weather conditions of 32 degrees Celsius, which may have influenced the events that followed. Additionally, the mountainous terrain around Athens played a significant role. Just after 2 p.m., the Boeing 747 started taxiing down runway 33R. The pilots noticed that the aircraft was somewhat sluggish, but they continued since this wasn't unusual. However, just before liftoff, a loud explosion was heard in the cabin. Engine number 3 had catastrophically failed due to overheating. By this point, the aircraft had already surpassed its rotation speed, necessitating the continuation of its ascent with a damaged engine. A flight attendant received an intercom message from a colleague at the back of the plane, reporting that the inboard engine on the right side had exploded. The colleague shared their fears about the situation, and the flight attendant felt a sense of foreboding about what was to come. Air traffic controllers watched in shock as Flight 411 struggled to gain altitude, leaving a trail of engine parts scattered along the runway. In the cockpit, the captain worked hard to coax performance from the plane, but there were complications. Engine number 2 had recently undergone maintenance and was not operating at its best, which further complicated the situation for the crew. Additionally, just after liftoff, a water flow warning sounded on the flight deck. Unfortunately, the flight crew misinterpreted this warning as a water runout warning and mistakenly turned off the water pump switch. Despite the damaged engine, the aircraft managed to take off, but the flight crew struggled to achieve the necessary airspeed and altitude. Facing a critical situation, Captain Megidis made the decision to retract the landing gear at just 35 feet of altitude, contrary to Boeing's recommended procedures for such a scenario. Retracting the gear meant the doors would open and then close, temporarily increasing drag, a risk that could have caused the plane to crash given its already precarious situation. The first officer complied with the captain's command because there was a hill directly in their flight path that would have been impossible to clear if the landing gear were not retracted, as it was slowing the plane down. Relying on his decades of experience, once the landing gear was up, the plane managed to gain a small amount of altitude. However, a 200-foot tall hill just a mile away still posed a significant obstacle. With limited options, Captain Megidis chose to pull the nose of the aircraft up, sacrificing all the airspeed he had accumulated. Miraculously, the Boeing 747 cleared the hill by just 9 feet. However, this maneuver cost the aircraft crucial airspeed necessary to maintain flight. Faced with the possibility of the aircraft stalling, the captain had to lower the nose again to pick up speed, trading about 50 feet of altitude for an increase of about 6 knots in airspeed. This decision was just enough to prevent a stall. At this stage, the aircraft was flying at approximately 200 feet above Kaltha, a densely populated area of Athens. Given that Kaltha is the second most densely populated municipality in Greece, with over 100,000 inhabitants, a crash there could have resulted in catastrophic destruction and a massive loss of lives. As the plane continued its precarious flight, it narrowly passed close to the Athens Tower Complex, the tallest building in Greece, marking another moment of extreme danger in the flight's journey. The aircraft was flying so low, it barely cleared the television antennas on some of the taller buildings in the sped area. In fact, it was so low that flight attendants could see the shocked expressions of people in nearby buildings as the jumbo jet passed by. The crew, struggling to keep the aircraft airborne, had to maintain a level altitude below 200 feet at a speed of 160 knots and were unable to make any turns. The captain was focused on steering the plane away from the city to an unpopulated area, minimizing potential loss of life if a crash were inevitable. A translated recording from the captain revealed he believed the situation was dire for everyone on board. Meanwhile, passengers in the cabin, unaware of the gravity of their predicament, thought they were on a scenic flight and began taking pictures. However, the aircraft was actually headed toward a collision with Mount Igalo just a few hundred feet ahead. The crew knew they couldn't clear the mountain with the power available at the time. Fortuitously, the flight engineer managed to optimize the 3 remaining engines, providing a crucial boost in power. Simultaneously, a southwest sea breeze began to blow, increasing the plane's speed with the cooler air providing some lift. Gradually, the airspeed and altitude of the aircraft began to increase, but the terrain below them was also rising, continuing the perilous situation. Knowing he couldn't clear the mountain at the current airspeed, Captain Megiddos realized he had just enough speed to perform a banked turn without stalling. He swiftly turned the plane out to sea and patiently waited for the airspeed to increase. Once the aircraft reached an altitude of 300 feet, Captain Megiddos, feeling more assured, decided to slightly retract the flaps. This adjustment allowed the aircraft to climb to over 1,500 feet, where he began to dump fuel to reduce its weight. With the plane now significantly lighter, it was able to safely climb and make its way back to Athens International Airport. Against all odds, Flight 411 landed safely back at the airport, without a single injury reported from the incident. Communication with air traffic control had been limited during the ordeal, and those in the control tower were relieved to see the aircraft return intact. Unbeknownst to him at the time, Captain Megiddos had narrowly averted what could have been the 3rd worst air disaster in history. Upon landing, the aircraft was met with enthusiastic applause from onlookers on the ground. Captain Megiddos then exited the plane to find his 2 daughters waiting for him, both terrified yet proud of their father. Captain Megiddos was reportedly so proud of his actions that he kept a copy of the flight data recorder with him as proof for whenever people doubted his incredible story. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and until next time.